of God, being intimidated by God. Anybody who is good for only those two reasons is not really being good at all. Why not teach children things like the golden rule, do as you would be done by? How would you like it if other children did that to you? So why do you do it to them?
So God is not only irrelevant, God is damaging.
I didn't say God was damaging, but I think it's depressing that anybody should suggest that you actually need God in order to be moral. I would hope that our morals come from a better source than that, and that therefore they are genuinely moral rather than based on outmoded scripture or based on fear.
Una Stannard. Let me bring in Una Stannard.
I think sometimes it's easier to talk in terms of human values and then to think about the lens that your faith makes you look at them and act on them. So, for instance, if I take my Christian faith and my Catholic religion, I am left in absolutely no doubt that life is precious, that everybody I encounter is equal in the eyes of God, and that reconciliation is something I may not always, at an emotional level be keen on doing, but I have it as my duty and my responsibility within my faith. So I think religion is what you apply and act with those human values.
Okay, that's a clear sort of opening set of views. Let me come to our next witness on this. Maryam Namazi was born in Iran before her family left in the wake of the Islamic revolution. You are part of the British Council of Ex-Muslims. I presume that you believe religious principles are not entirely helpful to developing moral values.
No, I actually think that oftentimes religious principles are actually quite immoral, to be quite frank. And I think that if you look at examples where girls are sexualized at a very young age, for example, if you look at Islamic schools where they're forced to veil, where they're taught that they're different from boys, where they're not allowed to listen to music, where they're completely segregated, and many such examples like that. I think, in fact, if there is any good morality that comes out of even religious education, it's not because of religion, it's oftentimes despite religion, and it's the result of an enlightenment and a vast social movement for 21st century values that have had an effect on religion as well.
Let me bring in, I will come to you in a moment, let me bring in Mohammed Muqaddam in response to that. I don't want to misreport, but at Muslim schools, the girls are put into a position where they are diminished as human beings.
Well, that's often the case where people are ignorant of what goes on in faith schools and Muslim schools. The fact is, our schools are run along a legal lines. They treat both sexes equally, provide them with the best opportunities. So that's often a case of people who have prejudices and ignorance.
Mariam?
I mean, I think it's typical of Islamic schools and the political Islamic movement to label any criticism a sort of prejudice and thereby racism, thereby trying to make people silent on criticizing it. I think the issues are very clear. I mean, the head of the Islamia school, for example, was quoted in an interview saying that you're born a Muslim, you're always Muslim, you can't leave. And that's things that have been told to me untold times for having renounced religion and Islam. There is threats, there is intimidations. Just yesterday, a 16-year-old girl was killed by her father for refusing to wear the veil. I think Islamic schools very much do suppress and restrict girls. Of course I did. I lived under the Islamic Republic of Iran.
The father who killed, did he go to an Islamic school?
I think Islamic schools, the problem with all faith schools, let me be clear that I don't have a problem with all faith schools, because I think if Catholic schools are a little more tame, it's because the Enlightenment has tamed them. I agree with Richard Dawkins that children do not have a religion. They shouldn't be labelled as any religion. They should be labelled human, and that is the best way to safeguard children's rights.
Pause there for a second while I bring in Nadja, because you touched on this before. You are wearing the veil, you're a Muslim. What is your response to what you've just heard?
I'm 16. I wear the hijab because I want to wear it, and I'm here. I'm out of my home. I'm doing well in school. I do a lot of stuff out of school. Nowhere does my religion stop me from doing what I want to do and being myself and expressing myself.
There's a confusion here. You are assigning to religion what is actually, if Nadia is right, a cultural phenomenon.
We have enough examples in the 21st century to know that it has everything to do with religion. And I mean, I think that obviously there are women, and I think with children it's a very different issue. The veil is a form of child abuse in my opinion. But for adult women, I think they have a right to wear it. She's 16.
She's an adult, and therefore she isn't being abused
no,
as well by wearing
well, this is the thing. I mean, there might be people who don't. I think, socially speaking, the veil is very often imposed on women. And I think the problem with the thing about education is that it has to help children have access to information, be able to question. And I think the problem with religion is it's actually very restrictive and prescriptive and doesn't allow people to question, because these are the rules and you have to adhere by them.
You said just now, and I want to bring in there for Una Stannard, that other religions maybe were softer, but that you had the same underlying objection. You are opposed to abortion. Abortion is a mortal sin in the Catholic faith. What do you say to a 16-year-old girl who's come to you and says, I've had an abortion?
Well, we believe that all life is precious, it's God-given, but a young girl in the circumstances you're talking about, like anybody else in challenging circumstances or circumstances where behaviours may not have been in accordance with our beliefs, still deserves our love and our care,
but
and that's what would happen. That's what would be given.
And says to the Catholic school, are you telling me I've committed a mortal sin? And the answer to that has to be yes, which is, I'm suggesting, is really out of kilter with social values that many people think that young person should be able to free to adopt.
Well, you keep referring to us being a secular society, Jonathan, and I would also, just want to put down a marker that I contest that. Mm-hmm. I would say that we don't support abortion. I make no apology for that. But if we wanted to put it very tritely, I suppose I would say, whatever the sin, you always love the sinner, and you give them support, and there is always hope in the Christian faith.
Barry Sherman, is there a tension for you between the religious values on the one hand? We've heard a couple of examples, and maybe touch on another one in a moment, between that and the principles of right and wrong that a socially cohesive society needs to develop?
I think that there is, but I said very early on in this discussion that religion and each faith has a wide spectrum. And what worries me is when I do visit Muslim schools, that I often see a religion that is quite an extreme version of Islam. I have Muslims in my constituency and in West Yorkshire who set up their own informal schools because of the profound influence of particularly a part of that religion that comes from Saudi Arabia, and they don't like that. So we've got to be very cautious about what faith is, how it impinges, what part of the faith, what part of the Anglican faith in terms of the evangelical wing in certain schools in this country.
Well, I was going to come exactly to Bishop Peter. So there is a conflict between many in your church's attitude towards homosexuality, the practice of homosexuality, and society's views about homosexuality. If you are taking schools and young people who say to themselves, I am gay, and they want to practice homosexuality, they get into some difficulties with many who hold your faith, which makes one wonder, is there not now a mismatch between the social values of this country, because you talked a lot about the origins of our social values, and the values that are held by a great many in your church, and actually causing great schism.
Yes, I mean, but the point about it is that there is a debate taking place. That's the difference, I think, that there's no lack of debate in schools on this question. There's no attempt to kind of muzzle the debate or muzzle people speaking for themselves in their sexuality and declaring
but
it.
If let me put it, so you're a teacher at school, and a boy comes to you, 16-year-old boy, and says, I'm gay, and I have sex. What is your view of what I'm doing? What's your response?